Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and as always, by my good friend, my business partner, my brother from another mother, Mr. Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Tobias Yellen. I don't know why I threw Tobias in there, but it kind of seemed like it fit a little bit.
Tobias, my father-in-law's first name. And we just recognized the 19th anniversary of his passing.
19 years gone. Wow. There you go. Do you light the Yahrzeit candle? Do you do that?
We did.
You do. Yeah.
We did indeed.
Good. Yep. Good way to honor those sadly gone.
For anybody tuning in not familiar, the Yahrzeit candle in the Jewish tradition is a 24-hour candle that you burn in memory of a beloved deceased party. And one of the logistical elements is you would never leave a candle burning when you go to bed, but you have a 24-hour candle that you do not extinguish so long as it is aflame. And I don't know about your tradition, Joshua, but we put the Yahrzeit in the kitchen sink when we go to bed of a night. And then when we wake up in the morning, we take it back out of the kitchen sink. And then we make sure somebody is near it, around it, got eyes on it over the course of the day.
Yeah, see, so we'll take that candle and we surround it with M80s and long wicks and buckets of gasoline.
Every family has their own tradition, right?
I mean, it's our minhag, that's our tradition. But yeah, no, that's it, right? It's the sink. It's tinfoil. We even do tinfoil in the sink, which
tenting it or around
no,
its
just
circumference.
Just sort of around it.
Gotcha. And, no foil for us. We just into the sink with it.
Yeah, you don't worry about your cat getting in there and just seeing what's up.
I was about to ask you about your cats getting in there. Yeah, our cats have no interest in most of the things we get up to, but I figured yours like to get their nose and paws into things.
No, but believe it or not, cats. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so free.
You have such musical Tourette's. It's so awesome. Like, I knew you were going to respond that way if I just did a little boop boop. It's brilliant.
Who could it be? So anyway, no, our cats really don't get into that. They get into, stupid things, but I think they see the heat. They see the heat, and I think they're smart enough to say, yeah, that's not going to work.
Cats are too much, man. They're too much.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Jason, all right, let's forget about cats. Let's forget about Yahrzeits.
Yeah, all this came from your use of Tobias.
Which I usually connect to, like, Tobias Funke from Arrested Development.
Yep.
But I think
famous episode where he blows himself. He blew himself.
Oh, he blew himself. Oh, I love it. I love it when he blew himself. But no, listen, I want to take us back because, last episode, that was season 8, episode 1, focused on Scotch Malt Whisky Society.
Indeed.
And
Ewan and Kai.
So here we are, season 8, episode 2, and we've got Nora and Adam from Lost Lantern. And, Adam's a person that we've known for a few years now because he came from Whiskey Advocate and he worked alongside our dear friend Susanna Skyver Barton. It
was lovely seeing them at the Jubilees when they would come around the table and we'd chitty chat and catch up.
Yeah.
In New York, you made it into their offices, didn't you? Didn't you have an in-person?
I did for sure.
Maybe pouring some liquid?
Oh, without a doubt. But to memory not running into Adam in the offices, back when I had an Impex hat to wear, one of the things... Back when, that's right. This is Jason... Right, we're not in the news section here, but here we are. It's I'm no longer with Impex Beverages. I'm now 100% Single Cask Nation, as you have been for some time. I've now dipped both toes within your waters, which is quite nice.
Get your toes out of my water. I'm trying to drink that. I'm bloody thirsty. I don't always drink faucet water, but when I do, it's got Joshua's toes in it.
But that was always a highlight when I was with Impex, and I would bring suppliers in. And one of the key things going into New York is ensuring that we're meeting with the whiskey advocate people.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, getting a chance to see Susanna all the time and so that was always a must. And, Adam had left Whiskey Advocate and he and Nora started Lost Lantern and they're growing from strength to strength, which is nice to see. And, I think I'm trying to remember because you'll hear it in a minute, but I don't recall if we mentioned it in the interview, but it was nice running into Adam at an event in San Francisco where he's pouring his Lost Lantern items and getting to taste some of those whiskeys was nice because you get to see what they're doing, their take on bourbon, their take on American single malt, their focus on blending, which I think is very cool.
Well, and speaking of just that, and since we've conducted this interview, we ran into Adam in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was picking up the award for their blend called Flame, which you and I will be tasting after the interview. And I'm excited to get my chops around it. I'm excited to see what's going on with this award-winning blend. And we came out the elevator, stepped onto the floor, and Adam was the first person we saw.
Right? Isn't that funny?
So, hello, Adam. How are you doing? Nice to see you. They of course had won the Icons of Whiskey America award for 23. You and I will carry that forth in America in 2024, and we will continue to build on good work. In the interview, we talk a little bit about independent bottling writ large.
Yeah, yep.
The value of multiple independent bottlers in the United States talking about American single malt, how that helps to build a category, how that helps to legitimize what these bricks and mortar distilleries are maturing and putting out to the world. It's I say it early and I say it often. It's a very exciting time to be in and around American single malt and having lovely people, new friends in Nora and Adam, with whom to discuss is also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, and that's what I was starting to say. With episode 1 of this season, SMWS. With episode 2, it's Lost Lantern. And it's something that you and I have tried to focus on across these years, which is the independent bottlers, the small brands, those that make their living highlighting producers that they've fallen in love with, that few people know. And it's
fallen in love with someone, you've fallen in love with someone, never fallen in love.
I don't know this song.
With someone you've never fallen in love with.
You're only meant to sing songs that I know, Jason.
My bad. How do you not know that song, Joshua?
What is it?
I have no idea. No clue. You're asking the wrong guy. I will not be taking follow-ups at this time.
Because no one wants to hear you sing it. They want to hear my
That's what I hear, Joshua. Mostly from you, but that's what I hear.
Listen, we have a lot of things to tend to after this interview. So I don't want to take up too much time ahead of the interview, but if there's anything that you wanted to let our listeners know about before we hand it over to ourselves and Adam and Nora, please.
I only want to signpost, which is we will have the interview, then the news, then a tasting, then an email, and then we'll be out of here.
Okay, fair enough. Nora and Adam with Lost Lantern, thank you both so much for joining us. It's funny. We hopped on this conversation before, and you guys referred to us as being sort of the OGs of American independent bottling. And I think about the journey that we've taken, which had been, at least at the very beginning, this slow journey. And then people slowly started recognizing us, and then a few more, and then a few more, and then we've gotten to the point where we're really proud of what we've accomplished. When I look at Lost Lantern, your trajectory of launch to popularity had a much faster path. And it's been remarkable, absolutely remarkable to launch. So I want to talk about that in a little bit, but first I'd love for our listeners to get to know you both a little bit and sort of the seeds that led to Lost Lantern and the approach that you've taken, which I think is a really cool approach to American independent bottlings. Would you sort of give us a Reader's Digest version of who you are and what you've done and what's led you to the launch of Lost Lantern?
Yeah, absolutely. So the vision for Lost Lantern really was to be an independent bottler for American whiskey modeled on the Scotch tradition with full transparency, but working with all different styles of American whiskey. And the reason that we wanted to do this is we had both been in the whiskey industry in different ways. I was a senior whiskey specialist for Whiskey Advocate magazine. I was reviewing whiskey from around the country.
And I was sales manager at Astor Wines and Spirits in New York City when we met. So, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's both very trained palates, both whiskey drinkers before this, both people that loved IB Scotch and spent many years drinking that, and honestly spent a number of years bemoaning how no one was doing this entirely focused on American whiskey, because it's such, even, God, this was almost 10 years ago now when we started talking about this not in us doing it, but just like an American IB, how we wish that existed, because even being in New York City and working at Astor and working at Whiskey Advocate, we couldn't get our hands on a number of things that we read about, and we didn't have a real sense of what the landscape was looking like, because things are so regionally focused. And we felt like before we even thought about us starting this, we thought that there was space for someone that was going out and kind of sifting through the American distilleries and finding the cool things. And in the way that independent bottlers that are focused on Scotland show a side of a distillery that you don't see otherwise, or give you access to whiskey that would previously been used in a blend, we felt like there was space for that in the U.S. And we spent a number of years bemoaning how that didn't exist. And this was all born out of that, the years of kind of complaining and then eventually saying, hey, wait a second, let's talk about our backgrounds, because I also have a background in finance and startup operations, and so I am the business side of things. And then all of his connections to distilleries through his work at Whiskey Advocate, what was the moment where we were like, wait a second, we can do this?
I remember one of the turning points was I was writing a story for Market Watch magazine, which is a spirits trade magazine. It's the only story I've ever co-written with someone. I was co-writing with my former colleague, Susanna Skyver-Barton, who I know you know as well, about
absolutely.
independently bottled Scotch in the U.S. retail market and how stores chose to sell it and why they would like it. And I was also writing a story about new American distilleries and that were doing really exciting things. And that's when it just clicked, somebody needs to do this. Nobody has done it yet. I know a lot of these people. Nora knows how to build a business and also knows how retail works. The reason no one has done it yet is because we're the people to do it. And decided, all right, let's go for it. This is crazy. We're kind of tired of living in New York City anyway. Let's go on an adventure. And then we spent 8 months on the road around the country visiting distilleries all across the U.S. because there's so many places out there. There are the places that everybody knows, but there are 2,600 distilleries in the United States now, and 95% of them have opened in the last 10 to 12 years. So they're relatively young in their trajectory, but some of them are making whiskey that's really exciting right now. Not whiskey that has like potential to be good in the future, but whiskey that is really good today, and people just don't know about it yet, or if they do, they can't get their hands on it. So that became our mission, to find that and get it out to people.
So on those lines, as you're going around the country and you're starting to have these conversations about being a US spirits focused IB, were you needing to describe the IB world to distillers? Was it a mixed bag? Some were familiar, some were not. You know, we've always got our own story about meeting with Scott Harris and Becky Harris at Catoctin Creek, and they got their own influence from Glenmurray. And so they had the Scottish connection without necessarily going down an independently bottled path.
Right.
But they really took to it very well. And I'm curious what that looked like for both of you.
I think so. American single malt producers knew this, and generally the response was, "Oh, thank goodness you're reaching out. We've been waiting for this. This feels like a sign of the industry maturing," and they were into it and excited. I think you've spent a lot of time with bourbon and rye producers, walking them through the benefit of an IB and what it means and what the system looks like.
Yeah, single malt producers knew the deal, and I think one of our favorite moments early on our road trip was the first time I reached out to someone who I didn't know already from my time as a journalist about setting up a visit and talking about it, and I emailed Jason Parker from Copperworks Distilling in Seattle, and he wrote back within a couple of hours and was like, "I've been waiting to receive this email from someone for years and would love to have you come by. We've wanted there to be an independent bottler and blender focusing on American whiskey," and they were part of our first project, and we've worked with them since then. And that felt like us to a validation. It wasn't just someone that like knew us from before, but someone who believed in the idea for the sake of it. And so some of those conversations were easy. Sometimes with bourbon and rye producers, we experienced what you saw with Catoctin Creek, where they knew about independent bottling for some other reason. Like the folks at Starlight Distillery in southern Indiana are primarily bourbon and rye producer and brandy, but their whole family has been drinking Signatory Scotch for many years. And they're like, "Oh yeah, this is like Signatory. Cool. That's great. We'll do this."
Okay.
And then there are some people who just are like, "So are you a distributor? I don't get it. It takes a little while." Or, "Are you a marketer?" Like, no, we're not any of those things. And sometimes that conversation goes places and sometimes it doesn't, but it's always an interesting conversation and different every time, as I'm sure you've seen too.
And it definitely helps. The more that we've been out there, the more that you all have been doing American whiskey, that it just becomes part of the framework of the industry. And it feels like now we're having more people reach out to us and say, "Hey, can we sell you some whiskey? We want to be part of the program," which is a lovely turnaround of that dynamic. But I think it becomes easier and easier as the independent bottling model moves over to the US and people see it in stores and read about it in magazines or newspapers or online. So I think the more of us there are, the better right now when it comes to that conversation with both with customers and with producers.
Still waiting to get that email from Jimmy Russell though. Any day now.
But it's funny that you actually bring up Wild Turkey at this point, because I feel like we're engaged in turning a ship around at Ocean, where you've mentioned single malt producers in America are saying, "Yep, we're right here, let's do this." More traditional Kentucky producers are kind of like, "You do what and how and whose bottle and what label?" And no, no, that's not a thing. And so, you know, we've always tried to run that up the ladder, up the flagpole to show, look, if you can do it like this and it looks like this, here's the benefit. But there's a very different way of running that business. And traditionally when we got started, it was that talk of, in America, casks have gone into warehouses, they've been turned around, they've come out in a different bottle and a different label with a very different story. And you already said it, transparency, right? We're all engaged in the business of transparency when we're allowed and when contracts allow. Have you found that gathering steam for you? Is transparency becoming more of a known term? And I'm saying that both on producer and consumer sides of this.
Yeah.
I think pretty definitively yes. And we've been lucky so far that all of the producers we've worked with, and that's part of how our selection at the beginning, have been happy to let us put their name on the label, but I think it's always been something we led with. Especially consumers, I think that they're looking for something with transparency these days, where that's actually almost turning into a buzzword, which I think is a little dangerous in and of itself, but I think is something that helps us. I think with producers, less using the word transparency and more just being like, hey, we want to talk about why you're awesome. Our entire job is to say you're the creme de la creme. We want to talk about you. We want to put your name on the bottle. And when you frame it that way, it has been a relatively more straightforward conversation where we're not trying to pretend their spirit is us. We're not trying to do anything. Like, our whole job is saying your whiskey is delicious, so we want people to know about it. And then the conversation flows pretty well.
Yeah. And we find that consumers get really excited about it too. Like, we pour at a fair number of whiskey festivals around the country, and I'm often surprised at how many people who are choosing to pay $100 or $200 to go to a whiskey festival haven't even necessarily heard of like the biggest hometown distillery in their city. Like we poured, there were times when we poured balcones in Texas or Westland in Seattle, and people haven't heard about it yet. But then when I get to tell them, this place makes amazing whiskey, and they're literally 10 minutes from here, and you can go visit them next weekend if you want. They're like, oh, how did I not know about that? That's great. And people get really excited about that. Or they could hear the opposite. And like, this is a place that's on the other side of the country that is never going to make more than a couple hundred barrels a year and doesn't want to expand. But this is a way that you can try it without, you wouldn't even have heard about it even if you were visiting that place necessarily, because they're just kind of small scale and focused.
Yeah, I like that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, the idea of independently bottled whiskey in the U.S. has, well, it has different origins, right? In Scotland, it's been, here's the brand that's bottling whiskey from distillery X, and we're going to give you the name. And then here in the U.S., it's, we've sourced whiskey from a distillery. We're not going to tell you who it is. And here's our brand, and this is my great-grandfather's recipe, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. The whiskey in the end could be good, but for the most part, it's a story that isn't necessarily factual sometimes. And the interesting bit is that, you know, the big bourbon, the big rye producers, like, that's the norm for them. We will contract distill and sell to this bottler, this company, and then you approach them and say, look, we'd also like to buy whiskey from you, and say who made it. What is this? This doesn't make sense. And you know, as an independent bottler, how great it would be to do that. Conversely, however, you're bottling whiskey from distilleries, like you had said, that people haven't heard of. And these smaller distilleries, or for the most part, haven't heard of, or in pockets haven't heard of. And these smaller distilleries are really keen to work with you. What is it like? What are the difficulties that you find in pushing some of these distilleries that are regional, that may not have distribution in the state that you happen to be in?
I mean, I think the hardest part is often just availability of whiskey on their part, because, like I said, these places are relatively new and often only have so many barrels that are ready. And the hardest thing is if it's a place that has a really strong following where it is already, a place like Frey Ranch in Nevada, which is one of the few estate distilleries in the country. They grow 100% of all of their grain on their family farm, and they can sell every drop they make in California, and people are obsessed with them out there. They have a really devoted following, so they don't need to give up extra barrels to an independent bottler for a little bit of money. So the conversation there is like, you have broader ambitions and eventually you want to have a national audience, and part of the way to do that is you seed the market early and have someone else talking about you. Just like you work with media so that some outside external objective source is saying this place is really cool, you can work with an independent bottler for the same reason, and it's just reaching a different set of customers and hopefully setting things up well for the future. But sometimes it is hard with those places that are selling everything.
Yeah. And I think from a consumer perspective, it requires a trust in us, in our palates. Yeah. And that's been the interesting thing for us is we're so much newer than you all are. We've only been releasing whiskey for 3 years. And so we're still in the phase where we're working on people getting to know our palates, getting to know the consistency, proving that there is consistency in what we're doing and the level of quality. So if you've never heard of a distillery, like with Corbin Cash in California or Brooklyn in Brooklyn, which have been our 2 most popular, like relatively lesser known distilleries, where people, a lot of people had started to know us, and so they bought a bottle, and that was fun to watch when we saw those same people come back and buy 3, or see people in the same area taste that whiskey. But when it comes to introducing those newer distilleries, it's all about building trust with people who are buying Lost Lantern.
My favorite thing is then I then see that person post on Instagram later with a post about one of that distillery's official bottlings and how much they love that. And they're like, oh, we never heard of this place before. We discovered through Lost Lantern. Now we got their own whiskey. And this is amazing too. And that's very satisfying.
It is.
So I like what you said about, consumers trusting you, right? And that's what it is. That's what an independent bottler does. They work their butts off to hopefully release each bottling is better than the previous one. But you talked about consistency, and I wonder, from the perspective of an independent bottler where you're not bottling consistent product, what is it that you hang your hat on when it comes to people looking for Lost Lantern whiskeys? What would they come to expect as that consistent through line from bottling this cask from this distillery and this cask from that distillery and so on?
I think at the most basic thing is a consistent level of quality. So they know when they're buying something that it's good whiskey, and generally it has a unique perspective, because we are by and large buying whiskey from distilleries that show something about climate. What does it mean to be in a cooler climate? What does it mean to be in a warmer climate? What does Texas whiskey taste like? What does Iowa whiskey taste like? That we're generally not buying from distilleries that are out of Kentucky trying to make Kentucky bourbon, because what do we have to say about that? Likewise, we don't really buy whiskey from distilleries that do an insane number of private barrels all over the country, because we're not giving people something interesting and new. Yeah. I think also we have a general perspective when it comes to flavor profile. Just like when we think about Scotland, do you like Gordon and MacPhail or Signatory or Blackout? Or like what's the profile that you're looking for? I think generally people have started to identify our stuff as cask strength, so it's strong, but having it be relatively mellow on the palate relative to the strength. And
consistently hear that people are like, oh, this doesn't drink like 130 or 140 or 120 proof or whatever it is. And I'm like, we get that feedback often enough. It's not something we actively select for, but it's clearly something in our palates that translates to people.
Yeah, especially as we've started doing blends. I think that's where people really get to see where our palates are emerging. And because there's one thing to pick a good cask, and then there's something else to show what your perspective is on a specific distillery through blending things together. And I think we go towards more like orchard fruit flavor profiles, not always, but when we blend, that tends to be the emergent style, and we're pro smoke very strongly. But I think it's stronger whiskey, but not having it pushed to full what we call face melter status. It's pushing the boundaries, but there's a mellowness and complexity that we look for in every single thing we put out, be it a blend or a single cask.
Yeah, Jess calls that hazmat strength. And so we talk about some hazmat casks that appear on some lists. Now that you're talking blend and palate and flavours, you make me think of way back years ago when we started One Nation Under Whiskey, when we had Mark Watt on for the first time. And he had talked about being with Cadenhead, being known for single casks, then putting out multi-cask releases. And suddenly people think you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. You're trying to make good casks, or you're trying to get good casks to cover up for bad casks.
Interesting.
And none of us think that is true. With your launch around single casks and now adding in blends, Was that always the plan? Did you see an opportunity within the marketplace? Talk to us a little bit about how the blending came together. And I think I'm right in saying you're using multiple distilleries and not multiple casks from single distilleries in your blends. Is that correct, or partly correct, or simply wrong?
Somewhere between partly correct and simply wrong, which is a big gap between those two.
I love that. I love that. Tied to Jason's name, chef's kiss.
Tradition continues.
We do all three of those, and those are actually our basically three core product lines.
Yeah.
Our single cask series, self-explanatory, blend series, which is whiskey from multiple distilleries, and then in the middle is our single distillery series, which we rolled out this year, which is blends of multiple casks from a single distillery. And for those, it often presents a unique perspective on that place. Yeah, and a lot of the ones that I sent you were that. But we actually...
And a rule of thumb with all of our releases is if it has a name, like Gentle Giant or Soaring Spice or Flame or Shadow, that means that we've done some blending. If it's just a distillery name, that's very easy to surmise it's a single cask. Yeah.
But we always plan to do blends, and we actually, this worked out very fortuitously. Our very first release included 4 single casks and a blend. Our first release in late 2020, during the height of the pandemic, was a single malt single cask, a bourbon single cask, a rye, a corn whiskey, and a blended malt called American Vata Malt, which is a blend of single malts from 6 distilleries across the country, that all of which are listed on the label, which was a way of capturing the landscape of American single malt at that time, which came together on our road trip because we kept visiting distilleries and kept hearing them say, wow, it would be really fun to play around with blending other people's single malt or creating a blended malt. And we heard this like 4 times and eventually decided, okay, let's do that. As an independent bottler, that's what we can do. And for that one release, we got all the distilleries in the project in a room together at one of the industry conferences in Denver in 2019. And we created the blend collaboratively. And everyone created their own blend. We ended up voting on the best one, talked through the proof together, and ended up with a blend that was 2 barrels from each of the distilleries involved. Which
did not go in intending that, but that worked very well logistically. And blending has always been part of what we've done. When we decided to do this, we have used Douglas Lang as a kind of guidepost when it comes to the balance between casks and having really unique perspectives on what a blend, the story that a blend can tell about a place and flavor profiles. And so we do a range. We have Far Flung Bourbon, which is all bourbon. We've done Flame and Shadow. Flame is mesquite smoked, Shadow is peated. So for us, it all goes back to having something interesting to tell people about whiskey and show people about what's happening in whiskey, be it a single cask, be it our single distillery series thing, or when we're blending stuff ourselves. What do we want to showcase that's already happening in the industry, but people don't necessarily get the opportunity to experience it since things are so regionally focused.
Yeah. Nice. As you mentioned Douglas Lang there, when I was looking over Shadow and Far Flung and Flame, you had me thinking of someone like Weems as well in Scotland, who have got those kind of, title, not driven, not led, but, you understand where you stand with Weems based on the title, just like you're saying just now,
like
Nora.
that.
So that's great to see. I think you've created something very smart for yourselves. That allows you to show off multiple parts of your palettes and your expertise. So, kudos to you. I love seeing that.
Thanks.
Thank you for sending along some samples.
With that in mind, is there? I really want something in my glass. Is there?
I do have an empty glass right here, Joshua. So you have read my mind.
Well, here's the question: we sent you a lot of different things, and I don't want to make you try all of them early in the morning, but I can make you try all of them. So that's kind of up to you, because depending on what we do.
Do you want something more traditional flavor-wise or something off the beaten path flavor-wise?
Off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Mountain Meadow.
So we're going to start with Mountain Meadow, which is part of our single distillery series, which is multiple casks from the same distillery. This is from St. George Spirits in California. For those of you who are on the YouTube, you can see it. It says Mountain Meadow and then St. George Spirits right under it, California Single Malt Whiskey. And they are the oldest independent craft distillery in the United States. They are older than we are. They just celebrated their 40th anniversary a year or two ago.
Wow.
And that makes them about...
You mean us as humans,
as
not
humans, yes.
not
which makes them 3 to 4 to 6 times older than most distilleries in the U.S. And
you want to talk OG in America? They definitely have earned OG status.
And I won't tell you too much about it because...
Oh, gosh. I immediately get Turkish delight
Ooh, interesting.
on the
I
nose.
like that.
Oh, gosh. That is... Oh.
Yeah, I had their they had that smells lovely. Holy moly. I had their own release that has the sort of sumo wrestler guy on the front.
Yeah, baller.
Baller, yeah.
The baller. And that had notes of jasmine on it. And I'm not a fan of jasmine, but that just like floored me. I just wanted to drink the whole thing. #responsibly. And I'm getting those similar sort of floral yet fruity notes going on here, which is so pretty.
Yeah.
Did you mention this is one of the small blends?
This is a blend of 4 different casks. We put this together pretty closely with their head blender, Dave Smith, over the course of about a year. And
learning to blend over Zoom was an interesting process.
And we don't do that for everything, but we do that for some things. And one of the great things about what we're doing is we get the opportunity to work with and learn from some of the best blenders and distillers in the country and see their processes and how they approach things and how they talk about it. And Dave Smith's tasting notes when he's tasting are incredible.
They're so good.
It'll be like various tropical fruits that I've never even heard of before, and specific like heirloom varietals of like, oh, this is like a Buddha's hand, but only the kind you can get from Malaysia, not the ones from Indonesia. And
oh wow!
I'll be like, I need to go hunt some of those down next time I'm in San Francisco.
It's nice to be in the Bay Area for access to a range of flavor notes.
We don't have good tropical fruit access in Vermont,
No.
unfortunately.
No.
Not with several hundred pounds of snow falling off your roof in the early part of the year.
Oh, there's almost a gentle minty quality across the palate.
Oh, interesting.
On that first sip.
There's
I'm still...
I will be very curious to see if you two can figure out what the unique thing is about this that's very non-standard from a production perspective.
So the comment I was about to make was it actually reminds me of a bit of the light whiskey that we've tried through or tasted through, which has got that kind of grain forward. And if you told me that this was single malt, which it does say single malt, from St. George, I would have been surprised by that. And so I wonder if it's column distilled single malt or triple distilled single malt or something like that that's taken out some of the heavier barley characteristics.
Up to you when you want to.
No comment yet.
Where light whiskey tends to be sort of orange spice gumdrops, this is like yuzu jam. Like it's there's a dense sweetness, but a bright, like it's sweeter than a Meyer lemon. It has that yuzu kind of quality coming through.
And for me, it's some of those hop oil notes that we had in our 2015 Chicago Jubilee that brought some of the citrus and brought some of the brightness, but also brought them with a certain heaviness. They are both looking at each other and smiling at each other.
The hop oil might be a good direction to go in with that.
Interesting.
Okay.
Is it
a hopped wash?
It is distilled from hopped beer.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Which is, I think, for me, is where you get that jasmine. Where, like, I don't get that without hops, but we find that distilling a hopped wash is very dangerous because you can get really skunky, dank notes if not done correctly. But we think with what they do, it gives you access to, especially on the nose, notes that we generally don't get from whiskey.
And it's very light. You can see the oak treatment is not too heavy. It's a 4-year age statement.
Which is great.
Yeah.
It's I absolutely love, and in and am in love with American spirits, but one of the barriers for me and for my own palate has always been that new charred oak cask, which can sometimes, overtake the grains that I want to appreciate more, or introduce too much tannin, which my palate, has a tough time with. When I saw the color on this, I said, "Ooh, that's nice and light. That's the wood is going to let the spirit talk a little bit, which I like."
Yeah, I'm sorry if I was deep into the process of this and my ears might have stopped working while my brain was going overtime. Did you mention the wood that this was matured in?
It's a combination of new and used cooperage. Some ex-bourbon, I think. Is that right?
Ex-bourbon. One was both ex-bourbon and then ex-single malt. They're single malt.
Okay.
So it's both reused from them.
But those are the younger ones, the 4-year-old that went into it. It was a blend of 4 to 7-year-old distillate.
Yeah, but the younger whiskey is the new, and the older whiskey is used cooperage. So not getting that overwhelming tannic structure.
Because to your point, that oak is definitely in the back seat, which allows that spirit to shine through, which makes me think of some of the light whiskey or Scottish grain whiskey where it's going into previously used casks. That's really tasty, and 4 to 7 years old. You're saying that's very drinkable. We're in a podcast. I was going to say, hope you don't mind me asking, but I feel like we're in the business of business. How much is this a bottle?
This is one of our most expensive whiskeys we've ever put out. It's $150 a bottle.
Boom.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Because St. George's whiskey is so sought after. Their own whiskey goes. What is the SRP on that? Is like
SRP is 120, but I think it's hard to actually get it on the shelf.
It's over 200. So we generally try to price above what is out from the distillery itself, but with this one we priced it where we thought it made sense relative to the underlying ingredients. We're not going to go to 200 or 500 with this. I think it's nice where it is.
I had an interesting conversation with someone at one of the conferences who worked for a Scotch IB, and they said that one of the more old traditional Scotch IBs, and they said that over there the standard is that you come in cheaper than the distillery's own release at cask strength would be, whereas here for us it's the opposite, because we don't want anyone to feel like we're coming in and undercutting them. Right. It's more like we are trying to elevate them and say, here's a really unique expression from this place that is worth a little more, as opposed to in Scotland where it's like, here's the version from the IB as opposed to the official version or something like that. So it's an interesting, different perspective over there.
Yeah, it's definitely something we do grapple with. We have grappled with. It's always one of those, what are your costs? What's your transport? We're not the bricks and mortar. We don't have an on-site bottling hall or bottling line. We really are. Joshua, please don't kick me in the shins over Zoom here. But we really are a third party in all of this, as we rebottle. That was on purpose. That was just to get you irate.
Well, one of the interesting things for us is, so you can see Cask behind us. We actually now do all of our storage and bottling and blending ourselves.
I was going to ask that.
Super smart, That's absolutely the right direction.
Especially with the blending, it feels needed because we tweak things and we taste things, and I feel like if we were working with anyone else, they would fire us so fast. They would not want to work with us because we'll take however long we take, and if we have to add a little bit of if we put everything in the tote, if we dump it and it's not there, we will tweak it until it's there, even if we had the small version of the blend tasted great. And I think if we were doing that with a contract bottler, that it would either become so insanely expensive for us with change fees and stuff like that, or they would fire us and say we are not up for this.
Single casks were easy to
single casks were great
with,
but as we started doing more blends, that's when it really made sense for us to get our own space. Yeah. It's a relatively small space, but it works really nicely for what we're planning to do over the next few years.
Yeah, and we have our tasting room up here in Vermont, so
which we're actually sitting in right now because it's warm, unlike the production space.
Well, I'm curious if I'm allowed to ask questions too. If I'm curious how you handle the production side, because obviously you have to both bottle in Scotland, and I assume there are some things you bottle in the States, and you live in different places. And I don't really know how you all handle that.
Yeah, it's the short answer is all American spirits are bottled in the U.S. and everything else that we do has traditionally been bottled in Scotland with contract, third party bottlers. Jason, you want to put some leaves on that single branch I've offered you?
Yeah, we've also bottled in situ in India, in situ in Australia, and those definitely add wrinkles to it as well. In situ in Japan, and so very very much to the point you're making. When you're doing single casks and you've tasted your cask sample and you give the thumbs up to going ahead with the bottling, much more straightforward, but historically, having that third-party bottling in Scotland, you're at someone else's whim. We have always envied those who had in-house storage, in-house bottling, and now with artisanal, with ASC, that's exactly what we have.
Oh, exciting!
That's
and
awesome.
we felt that kind of moved us up a league as well, and that was very appealing in the conversations that we were having in 2023. So as soon as you all announced that you were putting together a facility, I'm not going to lie to you, the green-eyed monster was alive and well on that day, because that's the fun side, right? The spreadsheets, the balance sheets, the breaking new ground is the difficult part. It's the tasting, the selecting, the blending, the getting it out to consumers that's really fun. Yeah. So I love that you were making that move for yourselves. I was definitely jealous. You were doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. So shakes fist at Los Lanterns.
For us though, and this will lead to a question for you both. Once we started bottling rums, that's where I felt we had to be a bit more careful, because our supplier of rums, one of the things we try to focus on is that whatever rum we've bottled spent the majority of its life in the conditions it was distilled in, right? Because there's something to be said for tropical rum aging versus aging in London somewhere, right? So we would always keep a keen eye on that. And Nora, you had said early on, that one of the things you try to highlight are what different climates do.
Yes.
And so now that you've got a facility in Vermont where you're doing, all of your operations, how does that play into that highlight of the different climates?
Yeah, so thinking about the more basic version of highlighting it, often when we're buying single casks, we release seasonally, and so we know when we're bottling and putting them out. So we do quarterly releases, and so something will arrive and it'll almost immediately go into bottle. We'll wait until it's done kind of settling after transport, but it's not going to spend a lot of its life in Vermont. If it does, we will tell people that. It'll be part of what's on our website. We'll say aged for 4 years at that place and then 2 years in Vermont. We're always very, very transparent about it.
We're not buying new make.
We're not buying new make. These are mature whiskeys. One of the nice things for us and really hard things for distilleries in Vermont is it's so cold here that for the vast majority of the year, the whiskey's not really evolving. It goes to sleep for long stretches. It'll do the kind of oxidation side of maturation, but the level of extraction that happens here is very low. And so for us, the nice thing is we're not seeing substantial evolution of the whiskey once it's here. So it wasn't the reason we're in Vermont. I actually grew up here, which is why we're here. But based off of tasting things that have been here for an extra year or extra 6 months, you do see some addition of complexity, but we're not worried about extraction. We haven't seen much of an increase in extraction. So you don't lose, in our opinion, so far, we haven't seen a change in the overall flavor profile. It might just be enhanced slightly. So that's been nice to see. I do think on the flip side that we do intend to play a little bit with some geographical things in the future. See what something tastes like if it's aged in Texas for 4 years versus 2 years in Texas, 2 years in Vermont. I think that that's a really interesting perspective, but luckily, because it's so cold here, unlike a lot of the places that we source from, it hasn't influenced the flavors very much.
Where in Vermont are you?
We're about half an hour south of Burlington. We're relatively north. We're very close to Lake Champlain. It's very cold here right now, but it's where I grew up, and so and a relatively rural place, which means it's a nice place to have a production facility and invest in our local community. Doesn't get as much foot traffic as New York City would have if we had stayed there, because that's where we were before, but it definitely works better for us.
It's certainly a pain for me as the head of sourcing sometimes, because we established on our road trip a rule that we will only work with distilleries that one of us has visited in person, and with no exceptions. And it's really hard to fly anywhere from Burlington. So I can't take 8-month road trips around the country at the drop of a hat anymore. But like we went to Reno last year to work on a project with Frey Ranch, and it was 3 flights just to get there. So 6 flights total to get there and back, and that can be a challenge sometimes, but it's an important part of our process to see the place, meet the people behind it.
And I know like the 4 guys that drive the trucks here at this point, because there are only a few of the freight lines that come up here, but it actually works to our advantage. They know us well. They know to call me. We have a good relationship. It's actually easier than having 20 or 30 different truck drivers bringing whiskey, because they know the deal with what we're doing.
So just a quick follow-up on that, bringing it in-house. So you're now doing the in-house bottling, the in-house labeling, and now doing the wrapping and the palletizing and all of that.
Yeah.
How has that transition been for you?
Well,
Nora is so good on a forklift. I am terrible. I'm terrified of that.
He's not allowed to drive the forklift.
I'm technically certified, but the instructor said he should just spend some time doing donuts in the parking lot before he ever actually has to
Don't let him in
real.
the warehouse. I mean, so the first 6 months, I basically did all of it. I actually pulled in my parents because they live close by, and it's people that I don't have to worry about calling them in the middle of the night and being like, help me. But it was me on the forklift in overalls dumping barrels for about the first 6 months.
Sometimes dumping them on yourself.
Wow.
Sometimes dumping them on myself. But we learned how to do it. And we learned what works and what doesn't. And we recently brought on someone to help me with production. So we have a full-time production person now. He comes.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. I shouldn't be on the forklift all the time. I like driving the forklift. I like doing barrel dumps and stuff like that, but it's generally not the best use of my time. But he comes from the beer world, so he's hit the ground running, and that's huge for us, so that he's in the background. You might see him periodically in there. Like,
yeah, I can just see a head over your shoulder there.
I will say,
might not have noticed that previously.
Your dad is pretty upset because it means he doesn't get to use the forklift as much. And it's pretty cool for him to be... He's retired, but to be helping out, driving the forklift and helping with bottling at your daughter's whiskey company is a pretty cool thing for him.
Yeah, we still pull him in sometimes. So
I like that. That's good connection.
Yeah, but there is a different appreciation for me for what distillers do. After having, I think that there is an intellectual appreciation always for the amount of meticulous decision making that each distillery makes, but there is something different when at the end of a very long day of dumping barrels and proofing and doing all of that, for in the gut respect that you get from having whiskey all over you and understanding what they do on a daily basis to make these whiskeys happen. It's been a really wonderful experience. I'm very glad I'm not doing it every day, but it was a worthwhile 6 months of my time to invest in it.
That's really awesome. I tell you, this happens so often with us. I'm sitting here, I'm enjoying this conversation so much, I'm noticing the clock on the wall, and we're not running out of time. We're just advancing. But I really want to get into a more detailed conversation with you both, because when we talk about American single malt whiskey, and we talk about the rise of this category, and we talk about our hopes for the ratification of this category, you two are absolutely out there on the front lines, leading the charge, encouraging the demand for and about American single malt whiskey. And I would love to learn more from you both, from your experiences, talking to producers, talking to consumers, your own feelings about this category. And I could go on, but I'm trying hard not to lead the witness on this. So please help us transition into a conversation about the category of American single malt whiskey.
Well, I think the best way to transition into it is by grabbing another one to drink. And
boom.
You want to do this?
Oh,
General John.
I like you so much. Just encouraging us to drink more whiskey.
Right.
That Mountain Meadow was so good. Kudos
Excellent.
to both of you
Absolutely
on that and the
excellent.
blending job that you did there.
So let's do Gentle Giant next, which is
one of my favorite prog rock bands, by the way. And this is another story.
I don't know them. I hope they don't listen to this podcast and find out that we put out a
I think
whiskey.
they all
with their
might
name
be
on it.
dead by now. They were a 70s prog rock band.
Perfect.
They don't know what podcasts are at this point.
So this next one is Gentle Giant, which is also in our single distillery series, which means multi casks from the same distillery.
Yeah.
This is from our friends at Balcones Distilling in Texas, your friends as well.
Indeed.
And one of our favorite American single malt distilleries, or just distilleries in general in the United States. And it is called Gentle Giant because it intends to showcase the lighter and more elegant side of Texas whiskey. And I won't tell you too much about it, except that it is much more used oak dominant than a lot of what you see from Texas.
Okay.
But while you start to nose that and noodle on that, I can say that we both think that American single malt is the most exciting style of whiskey in the United States.
Period.
We love bourbon, we love rye, we work with all of them, but American single malt is so exciting to us because it's breaking so much new ground. Single malt is made all over the world, but America has such unique and diverse climates, and single malt takes so well to the maturation conditions where it is that you see a tremendous variety of flavors that sometimes you haven't seen anywhere else in the world. There are places like the Pacific Northwest, which are like very rainy and temperate throughout the year. There are places like Nantucket that have a more Scotland-like climate, and then places like Texas and Arizona where there aren't really analogs for that anywhere else in the world that is making single malt that we know of. I'm sure there are some places out there, but there's just a tremendous diversity out there, tremendous experimentation with local woods, local sources of smoke, local grain grown in that area with barley grown in the heat of Texas and then fermented, distilled, and aged there. And I think it's just the very beginning of something that will hopefully last for a really, really long time.
Yeah. Wholeheartedly, we're excited. We're passionate. We're out there, shoulder to shoulder with you. Presenting the qualities and vagaries. I'm curious, from your experience and from the conversations you've had. We talked earlier. You mentioned 2,600 distilleries in the US. Obviously, not all of them are producing single malt. But what do you think the future could hold for American single malt whiskey? Do you think it can compete with bourbon and rye? Do you think it can compete with Scotch? Do you think stories will be told in a different way? Do you think every producer will go national and then international? This is a series of questions. You can pick up any thread you wish. But what do you see as you look forward?
I mean, I think it will. The closest analogy I can think of, or analog I can think of, is Japanese whiskey. Hopefully it won't take 50 years. God forbid, because that will be a problem for all of us that are trying to do American single malt now. But then it'll be a slow burn, and then it'll be like, here it is. We're hoping it'll be sooner rather than later. But I think Part of it is it requires a substantial amount of education, because when people think single malt, they think Scotch. And American single malt is not the same thing. And when people think whiskey in the United States, they think bourbon. And American single malt is also not the same thing. I mean, one of the things that we like to see is young drinkers. So people in their late 20s and early 30s don't have those preconceived notions, and maybe American single malt drinkers. And that's great. But I think that the future is rosy, but I think that it'll take a while, and we hope that we can help nudge it in the direction that we all want it to go. But I think that part of it is making sure that we don't coalesce on one style. I think having more regional things to taste, like mesquite smoke single malt, like the Pacific Northwest, part of what is going to be beautiful about the story, and I hope it'll be beautiful about the story, is the regionality and the kind of search for differences. Even when you think about Scotland, that conversation about regionality is something that people get so jazzed about when they're learning about Scotch at the beginning. And I think having those touch points in the US will be really important. It's nice to see some of the big players jump into the American single malt ring.
Yeah.
The big concern there is that they define what it is. So then once again, producers are being measured against something else, and that scares me a little bit. But if they're one of the many voices, great. But I think in some ways it's a little gray. When we talk to consumers, there's so much education that's required still. A lot of people at festivals will say, what is American single malt? And you have to, or is this Scotch? Like it hasn't gotten there. We don't get asked as many questions about bourbon versus whiskey, but we get asked a lot, is this Scotch? And that shows where the knowledge is right now. And we think that there is a lot of potential, but that educational hurdle, especially as an IB, where not only are you sitting, it's like you have to educate people about American single malt, and then you have to educate people about what an IB is, and then if you're blending it together, that's a third layer, and that can be a long conversation. So we see it as a worthwhile undertaking, but one that we're in some ways just starting the real conversation.
I think what's really positive there is when you say it like that, it sounds like it might take the next 50 years, to bring up what you said about Japanese. However, in the lifetime of Single Cask Nation, Joshua and I have already completed, in a sense, that journey for Scotch, where it was, what's an IB, what's an Arran, what's a Kilholman, what's a Benriach, and then 10 years later, those same casks are selling out in 2 minutes when we're able to get access to them. So I think, as much as, there's a lot of work to be done around American IBs and American single malt whiskey, I do firmly believe we can, if not complete, make a huge dent in that work in the next decade. And I'm okay using the term decade because I'm only coming 50. I think I've got a decade.
I hope that you're right. I think the difference being, though, is when it comes to a traditional independent bottler focusing on Scotch whiskey, at least on the retail, in a retail store, retailers already have a Scotch whiskey section. So they know where to put that. The problem with American single malt is retailers don't have an American single malt section, and quite often you have an American single malt producer ending up in the bourbon section. Yeah. And that's immediate misinformation, miseducation, and they're not doing it purposely. It's, where the fuck do I put this? I don't know where to put it. They're producing in America. It's going to go with the American stuff. Back to the point about Japanese whiskey. I think Japanese whiskey did such a great job of highlighting the fact that single malt can be produced somewhere other than Scotland, and that many stores said, all right, I can make a world whiskey section with Japanese whiskey, with Irish whiskey, and now there's that section. Mm-hmm. I think the education, we can do all the work that we want, and we will do all the work that we're meant to be doing. But in the end, that education needs to start at the retail shop or at the bar, because those really and truly are the front lines. We can call ourselves the front lines, but it's the people that are going to sell it and put it into people's glasses that are going to educate them.
In America, I have seen Westland in a world single malt section of a retail store.
I'll take that over bourbon section.
Agreed.
I've seen it in the Scotch section, and that's the real problem. But and I think that the ratification of the category will help with that a little bit. I think we are less optimistic than some producers about that immediately making some kind of the floodgates open up, because we think it's going to be slow and gradual. Like, the thing that will really convince stores to create that separate section is if customers start asking for it, and they say, if people keep coming in and say, where's the American single malt, eventually the store manager is going to get tired of hearing that and just make a section for it and put a bunch of things there. And that takes a long time, and it takes people starting to grow up with the category. Yeah. Like, even now, we sometimes find some Scotch drinkers who know a ton about Scotch don't always gravitate towards American single malt immediately, because it's different. And some people get excited about it because it's different. Some people are like, this isn't quite what I want. And that's certainly true for bourbon people too. But if someone grows up with Scotch or grows up with bourbon, that's very normal. But growing up with American single malt is no one has done that yet. It's just starting.
Well, for example, one of our surprise bestsellers at our tasting room has been, which you guys actually have, is the Andalusia triple distilled single malt, because it's triple distilled and it's new oak. So it's and Texas, but it's also it's 52.6 ABV, so 105. So it's relatively accessible, and it's been fun where I think a lot of people who know a lot about whiskey would look at that and be like, what is this? This is weird. But people who don't know a ton about whiskey yet, they come into our tasting room, they taste that, and they buy a bottle because it tastes good to them. They don't have the preconceived notions of what a Scotch tastes like, what a bourbon tastes like, how does this play against that? And I think that it's people like it's not having that context can actually be very freeing for us when it comes to talking to someone about why a whiskey is delicious.
Speaking of delicious whiskey, I just got the most wonderful coffee bean note on the finish of the Gentle Giant that I was not expecting. I've been sipping it for maybe the last 10 minutes. That really built, not on the Gentle Giant. Balcones. If you had put this in front of me blind, I would not have guessed Balcones on this.
Oh, see, that's
everything we know about Texas and new charred oak and heavy, weighty. This has a real balance, a real nuance to it. Really plays outside of the Balcones sandbox, and I think it really stands in testament to what you're trying to achieve with that something different from a known distillery. I am curious, as you mentioned, Scotch drinkers, and we think there's that natural affinity with single malt, and then it is different, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Do you think age statement is standing in the way for some consumers, where they've had so many decades of being taught it must be 12, and now we're working in 8-year-olds and 5-year-olds in Scotch? Are you having some of that conversation with consumers and people who come through your tasting room?
I think it is a issue with Scotch drinkers. I think in our tasting room it hasn't been as much of a conversation, but I think that and even at festivals, because the type of festivals that we're pouring at are more focused on craft. So I think one of the big hurdles for us is accessing the true deep Scotch lovers that really only drink Scotch. We're still working, and I know you have a number of people that buy your whiskey, so hopefully they're listening to this, but it's been I think even just getting them to taste our whiskey is harder, because it's 3, 4, 5, 8 if we're lucky, that we're not even getting access to them yet. I think it'll come, but that's, as a relatively new company, I don't even know that we're getting an opportunity to have those conversations with those people yet. We like to say we're age agnostic, because climate makes such a big difference. What 3 years old in Texas is very different than what is 3 years old up here in Vermont. And I think for us, it's just we have a conversation regularly about what does maturity taste like? What does that mean to us?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that Scotch whiskies did such a great job training people on age and what it could mean. And the fact is, Scotch Whisky Association protects the word Scotch, but that's always been tied to the word single malt. And people just use, like Jason had said earlier, like single malt has become shorthand for Scotch. You know, we do tastings, and you know, when I wear my Impex hat and I'm tasting M&H or Penderyn or, you know, insert world whiskey here, and I say, try this 3-year-old, and they're like, wait a second, why is this not 10? Why is this not 15? Well, you're using the wrong road sign. Like 10, 15 for Scotland means something. 10, 15 for years in Israel would mean something completely different. It'd mean empty casks,
Yes.
right? So, you know, it's that conversation. And like you had said with, you know, Texas versus Vermont, you're going to have 3 years between those two casks. You're going to be completely different.
Yes.
And we've put out such a range of ages for the U.S. from 9 years old is our oldest, all the way down to a 1-year age statement single malt, and a 1-year age statement blended malt, which we may taste later.
Which you have, yeah.
Yeah, and some people care and some people don't, and it's usually just we think of it as a conversation starter.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I think this maybe piggybacks with Joshua's comment. When Scotch was teaching age statements, it was contextual for Scotland, but it was taken as contextual for all single malt.
Okay.
And I think that's the business we're all engaged in now, is educating as to other contexts. And I'm very up for that challenge, and I'm very excited about that challenge. So I'm glad to have fellow partners in crime as we go around the land, doing our very best to represent a category, and palates and tastes and damn good whiskey. And we're never going to forget that aspect of it. Thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you both and getting to learn about Lost Lantern.
Yeah. Thank you
It's
so
been-
much for
it's been
having
a lot
us.
of fun.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Continued success in 2024 and beyond.
Cheers.
Indeed. Nora, Adam, thanks again so much for taking the time to talk with us and for sending us this care package, right? You know, we got to taste Gentle Giant and Mountain Meadow with them on the podcast or in the interview, and we're about to taste Flame and Shadow in a little bit. And I just want to say, you know, the invite was given to us to visit Adam and Nora in their tasting room in Vermont, and I would urge others to do the same. And if we're lucky, and if listeners are lucky, we may be able to see Nora on a forklift traveling around and moving casks from here to there. So
Maybe it'll be Nora's dad.
maybe it'll be Nora's dad. Yeah.
Maybe it'll be somebody else entirely. But best of luck to them. You know, we say it all the time. You know, best of luck. We're all trying to do what we can for the American single malt whiskey category, and we can only assist each other. The more we talk about this, the more people we pour this for, the more times we get to talk about an award-winning blend.
Yeah. You know, for me, when I think about our time and our journey with single malt, you know, I feel like it's been us and the producers shouting to the rooftops about American single malt. We've been doing it for 10 years now, and it's so nice to have another player who's putting a fine focus on that to lift all the voices together, because it's such a phenomenal category that more people need to understand and explore, and we're all together in the forefronts of it. So these are warm waters. Come on in. Let's make American single malt. Let's make American single malt great again, Jason.
Are your toes in those warm
My
waters?
toes are in those warm waters.
My God, your toes have been in more water today than Jaws.
So what's on the agenda? What are we meant to be doing now, Jesse?
Yeah, so next we are waking the paper boy.
Oh, waking the paper boy. Okay. Wake up, paper boy.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble again!
We're going to have a bit more of a fine focus on today's news. We want to tell you the very exciting news that US online e-commerce will, for the first time in 2024, be launching 3 distinct casks. Do you see how I stopped there, Joshua?
3
Because I was going to say
distinct-
and then they're not from a single category, so I stopped myself.
That's right. That's right. Well done.
So
you.
we will have a 25-year-old Ardmore that we have mentioned previously. It will be on the website, singlecastnation.com, for $275
For a 25-year-old.
25-year-old Scotch single malt.
From a 25-year-old that was produced at a time when Ardmore was direct firing their stills. This is historic liquid. And
Yeah, right?
we've said 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, that $10 per year rubric of a well-priced, independently bottled single malt Scotch whiskey sort of went out the door. And the fact that we can get a 25-year-old selling for $275, just a hair over $10 a year, I think that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, really excited to get that out there. I think that'll go over very well.
Yeah.
We also have a 5-year-old Ardnamurchan, which will be, please listen to the end of this sentence, our first American online e-commerce release from this distillery. However, Jess saw terrific success with the global version of the Ardnamurchan 5-year-old.
Indeed.
And the excitement around this Ardnamurchan, you've said it many, many times on the podcast, Joshua, how they're easily in your top 5.
Easily.
Right?
Yeah.
Easily. It's quite striking in being out there in whiskey drinking land and speaking to fellow drinkers of Scotch, how many people are right there with you. Ardnamurchan has landed so well in not just the American mindscape, but I'm using that because that's where you and I are sitting.
Yep.
But it has really landed well in America. And as someone who's been out there pouring it when you formerly wore your Impex hat, what have you seen in terms of enthusiasm around Ardnamurchan?
I think it's for those of us that have experience with old school malts. There's a reason that Springbank has sadly been papified, because it has this old school style. It has this charm to it that seemingly few distilleries can not replicate, but sort of fit this category of, they don't really make whiskey like that anymore. And I think Ardnamurchan's whole style fits within that. It just stands outside of your other modern distilleries, which I think are making, fantastic liquids. And I'm thinking of, your various Jim Swan distilleries, which are all producing remarkable liquid. And Jim Swan did, inform some of Ardnamurchan's own production, but they took it in a different direction. And it seems as if they're really trying to touch on how whiskey was once made. And I think those that have that appreciation of old school stylings are glomming onto it. And the good news is people have still yet to really discover Ardnamurchan. So you're getting in early doors. Check them out. Look at what they're doing. Buy from us. Awesome. Buy from them. Awesome. All of it helps Ardnamurchan. But yeah, if you have a true appreciation for old school style malts, I think Ardnamurchan, even with its younger liquid, will fit within your palate.
Yeah, nice. I don't disagree with a word there. This is a sherry Oloroso hogshead.
Phenomenal.
Coming up for e-commerce, and it will be $130.
Yep.
For a very up-and-coming Scotch. Oh, gosh. So excited to get my bottle out and get it cracked.
And, we looked around at what other Ardnamurchan single cask prices were. And if you buy a single cask from Ardnamurchan here in the U.S., it's going to be the same price. Impex had one at part of their Impex collection. Same price, too. So, if you're familiar with Ardnamurchan single casks, it's going to fit well within the price range you're familiar with. And then there's the third bottling, Jason, and it's the third bottling which helped me, and by third bottling, I mean the three that we're talking about to be released on our website.
Also the third bottling from this distillery.
Also
our
the
third spirit of collaboration.
Our third spirit of collaboration from this distillery. But when you add our Ardmore, our Ardnamurchan, and this kosher for Passover rum from Thornton Distillery, it makes me want to refer to this release of 3 casks as our pirate release. Because you've got Ardmore and Ardnamurchan, and then you've got a rum hearty-tar. Yeah. So we've got
I did not see that coming. That's well done. Well done. I was only looking through my eye that has the patch over it. That was my mistake.
One-eyed Willie. So yeah, we have this kosher for Passover rum. It's actually a cask that we selected last year, but the timing didn't work out to release it before Passover. But it's since been bottled, and it's just hit our warehouse. So we're going to be putting this on for sale. And for those that have purchased our previous Thornton rums, which were more softer in style, like when you think of rums, you have the 4 square style, which would definitely fit the bourbon drinker's palate. And then you have some rums that have a bit more of a higher ester content, which you'll still get that sweetness coming through, but then there's a tropical fruitiness that comes through because of those esters. This rum starts like going in that direction. So it has a bit more of that tropical fruit funkiness going on, which is just makes for such a pleasing rum. And I'll tell you, it makes a hell of a daiquiri.
You've got me thinking tinned fruit cocktail syrup. Is that in the ballpark here?
Spot on. With maybe a bit of a focus on the pineapple and some of the papaya in there.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, for US folk, there will be an announcement March 12 that these 3 casks are coming. They will be released for sale March 14. So make sure you've got that date in your calendar. For the first launch with a new corporate partner, we're excited to see the nation show up and support and get their hands on some bottles. So many people have been saying, well, what does the future hold now? What does the future hold now? Well, get these 3 bottles. It'll start to tell you what the future holds.
There you go.
Right? This is the beginning of an answer to that question. We are then building the online e-commerce in such a way that 4 weeks after this mid-March release, we should have a mid-April release of another 3 casks. And rather than muddy the water now, we will come back in a future news segment and give further information on those 3. But we want the nation to start relying on bottles hitting the website on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Yep.
And they can start to expect to see a triptych of casks showing up on the website. Should I give you a second to enjoy that one, Joshua? I like your face that you're making right now.
Gosh, you just
tells me you want space.
You just don't get a chance to use words like triptych too often, and I commend you for that.
Thank you. You can take that to the bank. I will also say that at this time, they are in the United States. They haven't started making their way to distributors or retail shelves just yet. But we do have, for retail store shelves in the US, we have a Dalyuen, a Linkwood, a Kalila, and a Diamond Rum.
There you go. I'm so excited for those.
I find myself saying, I'm so excited for that Dalyuen, and then I think, yeah, but I'm also really excited for that Linkwood. And then when I say that, I'm thinking, yeah, but what about the Kalila? It does turn into a bit of an incomplete Joshua Hatton list.
It does. Speaking of incomplete lists, we failed to mention the price on the rum. Our previous rums.
We certainly did, Joshua.
You railroaded me. You kept talking. I couldn't bring it up. So the rum will be $95 a bottle. I think the last one we did was $90 for the bottle. But here we are. This rum is a year older than the previous, so it just slightly older. Cost us a bit more, but here we go. And it is, for those that do keep kosher for Passover, it is kosher for Passover and certified by the OU, the Orthodox Union, and for those that are rum curious and aren't kosher keeping, we just urged you, and we've done this in the past, please allow the kosher keepers to purchase what they need, and there will always be some left over. There always has in the past. Just wait a day or two, and let the kosher for Passover keepers purchase what they need, and then you can get some bottles. It's been a nice little handshake.
If you do give it a day and it is sold out, please email Joshua at
Joshua@jason@singlecastnation.com.
I would give it a few hours and then jump in with both feet. If you can get Joshua's toes out of the water. Listen, I'm going to close out the news segment here by saying we did hint that we would have Jess on a future episode to talk about the global releases that are impending. Those will be getting bottled in March. And we will have Jess on once we get closer to those. Those have got to, yes, they'll be sold in the UK. They also have to get to Germany. They have to get to Japan. They have to get to Canada. So, we will be having a UK-based conversation with Jess, but now's a little bit early, and we really wanted to keep the focus for US nation members in this little news segment. Non-US nation fans, we see you, we love you, and we have got, in concert with Jess, 6 crackers that you will not believe.
They're insane.
And
They're insane.
I'm so excited for them as well. But I'm going to leave that there, and we're going to let the paperboy go back to a resting state as we transition to liquid. Jess said this earlier. We had a meeting with Jess. She said, liquid on lips. And she said, everybody's saying it, and it's becoming a little bit trite. But I think it's literally true. We are here to put liquid on lips. Mine, specifically.
Liquid on Lips, Volume 7. Is this thing on? Hello? So I've got, just so you're aware, Jason, I've got Flame and Shadow left and right, 1 and 2. That's how I'm doing it.
Same arrangement. We've got Flame, a blend of mesquited American single malts from Arizona and New Mexico at 57% alcohol. And we have Shadow, blend of peated American single malts from Colorado, Iowa, and Oregon at 63.2% alcohol.
You know, when I first saw this, first I read the Flame label and I said, a blend of mesquited. And I said, wait a second, that's not a word. And then you look at the other label and it says blend of peated. And I said, oh, okay, that's kind of cute. Peated, mesquited. I like that. I'll back that up.
And you accept that peated is a word?
My iPhone wants to change it to pleated every time, but that's another story.
Mine's always seated. Mine gets auto-corrected to seated.
Oh, there you go. So Flame is 57% alcohol and Shadow is 63.2% alcohol.
Hey, that's what I just said.
Oh, you said that?
I did, yeah.
Hey, okay.
I know you probably went down the path of having that little mesquited conversation in your head and your ears stopped working at that point, but yeah, I gave the full details from the sample labels.
What did you say?
Exactly. As soon as you put your nose in the glass to nose it, I knew your ears had stopped working and you were telling yourself stories in your own head again.
Because the nose on Flame is really spectacular.
So you use that word. So why? What makes it spectacular?
You know, when I think of mesquite smoke, I have a very specific thought in my head. You know, mesquite is very singular, or it had been a very singular smoke. And when I nose this next to the Shadow, I would almost argue, at least on the nose, the mesquite comes across more peat-like. What we think of as peat, like almost like a Scottish Highland peat, where the Shadow, to me, comes across more woodsy, more like wood smoke rather than peat. Like they almost seem swapped, and I made sure to not mix my samples up. I know they're not mixed up, and so what I think is spectacular is that, you know, whether it is these producers or Adam and Nora putting these together, they've created something that helped me to change my preconceived notion of what mesquite smoke could be or should be doing. That, to me, is a spectacular feat.
Well, I tell you what's also interesting for me. If one of the things you and I have always said about independent bottlers, and back in the day about bloggers as well, and reviewers, even before that about Michael Jackson and Jim Murray when they were publishing books, you get to know the person who is putting whiskey in front of you.
Yeah.
Whether it's a review or a single cask or a blend, you get to know that person. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I put my nose into Flame with the word mesquited on the label, I immediately thought, oh, with Gentle Giant and Mountain Meadow and now Flame, and then I went ahead and stuck my nose into Shadow as well, we are getting access to what Nora and Adam value. Yep. And this isn't mesquite forward to my nose. This is warm fruits and warm, fruit syrup, right? We've got the cocktail syrup in mind from our conversation on the Thornton rum there. But it's warm, it's engaging, it's inviting. And it's not mesquite driven, it's fruit driven. And I'm getting to know our producers here, and I love that part of the relationship.
So two things. The ABV on the Flame, can't do it again. I can't tell that joke a second time.
It's never stopped you before. And a third, and a fourth, and a 20th, and a 60th. Have you tasted it yet, or are you still returning to the nose?
Yeah, I'm returning to the nose, and I'm also returning my eyes to the glass. And I'm doing that because I'm looking at the oils and it's stunning. Like you can tell just visually that this is going to be really rich across the palate. It's going to be tongue enveloping. Have you tasted it yet?
I did, mostly because I just said the same thing to myself, which was, wow, you're still nosing this. You're nosing this again. It's so easy to sit with it and just explore the different ways into this dram. But yeah, in tasting it, the oil's definitely there. The palate is quite sweet, pleasingly so. Again, those warmer fruits, those richer fruits. And then as it transitioned towards the finish, I had the image of a wood shop floor where the fresh wood shavings have fallen to the floor. And as you walk across it and you kick those up, you get those fresh aromas of wood shavings. And I thought that was very pleasant as it moved towards the back. Also gave me an image of malt floors where the grain is quite present in here as well. And even though we are talking mesquited, that mesquite is still in the background in a good way, where, and you'd said this earlier about, it's almost like a Highland peat. And what do we always say about Highland peat? It frames the experience of the whiskey, right? It never takes over.
Yeah.
And from my experience with a lot of mesquited whiskies, is that the mesquite takes over and the mesquite leads the charge. And you always say, oh yeah, it's mesquited. Now what else is it doing? And this has inverted that game, where I'm going through these other qualities and then thinking, there's the mesquite, or there it is over there. A really nicely put together dram there. Really impressive.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I just took my third sip, and the first sip, I found that the flavors, nothing was hitting the front of my palate. It was all the center of my palate and back. But then you take a second sip and you start to discover more flavors. And then on the third sip, that's when the flavors started hitting the front of my palate. And it was, you know how sometimes you come up with a tasting note and it doesn't make sense, but if you combine them, you can say it's almost as if you've taken this and this and you've mixed it together. No one's ever done that before, right? And you come up with something interesting. This is the first time I've come up with this pairing of tasting notes. I got this flavor where it's almost as if you took orange, lemon, and lime peels, candied them, and then made a creamsicle type flavor from them.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Totally, and it speaks to that brightness, that freshness, that evolution of fruits, some of that sweetness, a little bit of that fruit cocktail syrup. Like, it's really bringing in all of those components.
Would you, on the palate, would you say, oh man, this is smoky? Like it, are we so beyond smoke that it's imperceptible to us? Do you think the person that's new to this world might be, a bit overtaken by it? I think
there's always going to be somebody somewhere who says that's smoky, right? Like I remember pouring a heavily sherried Tam Dhu at a whiskey festival for somebody who told me they do not like peat smoke. I said, here's a heavily sherried Tam Dhu. And the first thing they said was, oh, that's a lot of peat. Like, what do you do at that moment, right? Yeah. What do you do with that? So someone's always going to say it. Is it again? I think it's just. It's the timpani in the orchestra, right? It's settling this, it's grounding this without you even necessarily knowing that it's happening. I think that is incredibly well put together.
Yeah, no,
I'm really impressed.
This is something.
And the reason I'm laughing is because I'm thinking, I wish I'd done that. That's why I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is making me think of in terms of something that we did do? Is our Wolf Island, our take one or take two. Yeah. The interplay between the smoke and the grain and a bit of the Oh, I didn't mean to say smoke first. I meant to say the fruit and the grain and the smoke.
Yeah.
That interplay that happens there, I'm getting here represented by Arizona and New Mexico single malts. That's, really, really delightful.
Yeah, right. And if we're looking for examples of whiskeys to say, American single malt has arrived, I think that this is not a bad sample to put in front of someone to say this has arrived. Like that is phenomenal liquid. So
I'm saving a little in my glass so that I can jump over into Shadow.
Yeah, there you go.
And then come back to Flame and see if we get an answer to your question about, is Flame delivering smoke on the palate? Let's see how peated does out of Colorado, Iowa, and Oregon.
Yeah, there you go. And again, 63.2%. Jason, I don't know if you mentioned this before, but that's 63.2% alcohol.
I'm almost certain that I did. I'm almost certain.
Yeah, the the nose is great. And
yep.
It's we talk about this quite a lot, especially when it comes to doing tastings where we incorporate a number of peated whiskeys into the lineup, is the context of that next whiskey changes after experiencing the first whiskey. And so going into this nose, the peat on the nose of Shadow has been diminished, and now I'm getting more malt. I'm getting some of that oak coming through. I'm getting like roast, like something herbaceous, roasty and herbaceous, all in the same sort of delivery, if you will.
Yeah, roasty for sure. Mm-hmm. That's a nice note. I did the nose and then I had to put it onto the palate, and I would say this is even more unctuous than Flame. The oils in this are even more full.
Oh wow. Oh wow. There's a there's some American single malts like Westward and Copperworks where sometimes you sip it and you say, I understand that this was done from a brewer's perspective, and I'm almost getting hop oil qualities despite there being hops anywhere near this, and I'm getting some of that bright hop oil freshness coming through here. And I don't know what the distilleries are from Colorado, Iowa, and Oregon, and I'm not certain about the production from all three of these distilleries, but somewhere in there it seems clear one of these producers is taking a brewer's approach first. Like you could taste that in the final liquid, or at least that's what I'm guessing. It's really nice.
Yeah, it has a little more weight to it than the Flame.
There's a spicy element to it as well.
I was just sitting asking myself, I wonder where or if there's new charred oak in here, because I was thinking the same thing about that presence on the palate, but it's a wood spice, right? It's not necessarily manifesting as Moroccan spice bazaar or some of those Indian spices that we sometimes talk about. This really is wood spice.
It's
wood, nice spicy sandalwood.
It's wood, sandalwood, perfect. If you were to take that sandalwood spiciness, pleasantness, and mix it with some roasted fennel, like that, I think is where this sits. Like that is just
fresh cracked pepper as well.
There you go. Yep.
Oh, that's really building on it. It had a lot to prove after coming after Flame. They're remarkably different whiskies. And I think Shadow, the peated, as it layers on my palate, I'm getting more and more from it. And it's not necessarily a grocery list of ingredients. No. It's more of a presence. It's more of an experience, right? I'm feeling contentment.
Yeah.
I'm feeling
It's comforting.
I don't know if
it's real comforting.
It's a while since I've experienced this, but I think I'm feeling happiness. That was a good response.
Wow.
I'll have to check my notes from around 2014, but
yeah, this is a comfort dram. You know, I have this thought in my head quite a lot, and you and I have had this conversation a number of times, and it's when it comes to American single malt, I wonder, A, who the market is now and who the market will be. Because when I taste these, I don't think it's going to be the bourbon fanatics that are going after this. Though I think they should, because, you know, I think any whiskey drinker, they're there for the flavor. And I'm hoping that they want to discover other flavors, because I think they'll find some joy here. But, you know, you've got Scotch drinkers, certain Scotch drinkers that are like Scotch or die. And then you've got, you know, bourbon drinkers that are bourbon or die. And we need like the independent voters to come in here and really help us along. It's remarkable liquid. And it's back to our days of educating the consumer on what remarkable liquid could be and where it could come from, you know?
And the more of us who are out there educating the consumer, introducing the consumer to other flavors from other distilleries. Yeah, I think the one that always comes to mind for me in America is the rye drinker. Look at you and I talking about the wood spice on Shadow there. Mm-hmm. Like, how could you not put that in front of a rye drinker and have success?
Yeah.
The question is whether or not people are afraid of words like peat and mesquite. And literally for a decade, I've been talking to people about, you love barbecue. You love wood smoke in your foods.
Yes.
Like, why can you not embrace it in your whiskey? It's a weird one to me. And then sometimes I've had success with it. Highland peat, obviously, more success than Isla peat. But even look at the use of American peat now. That's not the same peat that people were encountering when they first tasted a Lafroig or a Lagavulin, and it blew their mind and swore them off Scotch, and now swears them off anything with the word peat attached. Like, there's an entire world out there of smoke that I think can have huge success for American drinkers, UK drinkers, global drinkers.
Yep.
I think it's just introducing people and telling them the right story attached to it. Those are two cracking drams.
Yeah.
Flame and Shadow by Lost Lantern. Cheers, Adam and Nora, for sending those over. That was a treat, an absolute treat.
Yeah, have you gone back to Flame?
I just did
full fruit. Like, it is just all
absolutely.
about the fruits. Just, you know, again, it's creating that context. And listen, for the listeners out there that are a bit nervous about peat, that are a bit nervous about smoky flavors, whether it's Lost Lantern with these whiskeys or Lagavulin, or, you know, just insert whiskey here that peat has had its influence on. If you can find the time to put 3 whiskeys in front of you, 2 or 3 whiskeys in front of you that are peated or smoked, and just go through them back and forth and over, you will give your taste buds and your brain context to discover the flavors that are initially hidden by the peat. Don't be scared by it. Like, are you a coward? No. Pull your pants up. Get onto the peat. Try the next one. Go back to the first one you had, and you will have dug past that peat. You will discover other flavors. And just, you know, stop being such a chicken shit. That's what I say.
I will say, in returning to Flame, where it's a big fruit bomb and delicious for it. In the finish in my throat, I get the mesquite. That's the spot where the mesquite says, "I'm not dead yet." Right. That's that little kind of framing moment.
Yeah. So it finishes
really
in your throat.
Excellent. Takes me back to college. What can I tell you?
There you go. So, Jason, you and I received an email, and I know you're about to bring it up just now.
In the mailbag episode, we talked about returning to John B. Corey Jr.
Sloop John B.
There you go. You flummoxed us all with that in the moment, and we've all had ample time to listen to that song. The number of people
that reached out to say, how did they not know Sloop John B?
Okay. So are we at 1 or 2 people reaching out?
It was 2.
There you go.
It was 2. The number of people is
overwhelming. Overwhelming. And we did say we'd get back to John's email in the first episode of season 8. And then the episode, as these episodes tend to do, went in its own direction. We're now returning to it in episode 2. And we sincerely thank John for this. It has a bit of an intro, and then even in John's own words in the middle, he says, drifting into my question. So he is amongst friends here. Yeah. So here comes the preamble. As this is my first message to the 3 J's in 2024, Happy New Year. Well, it is March 6, John. Happy New Year to you, my friend.
Can you still say Happy New Year on March 6? Okay.
Well, he sent this January 10, so it's only fair to reciprocate. He says, the team definitely started the year with a bang, referring to the January 4 announcement that we had sold the company. Yeah. Having listened to all the episodes since the start, parentheses, I used a hospitalization to binge on the back catalogue. End parenthetical comment. That's so awesome. I hope you are well now, John. I hope you're
given the length of our episodes, he must have been in hospital for 10 weeks or more. Good gosh. Poor guy.
I like your use of 10 weeks and not 10 years. It has been really special to share in the journey from the early days. Like a fan sitting high up in the nosebleed seats cheering on the home team. Well done to the team and the success so far. May the future be bright, parentheses, with or without sunglasses, Joshua. Close parentheses.
He knew that I was going to say, the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. I love it. I love it. Love it. Oh, warms my heart.
So John says, I listened to the interview of J&J on Mark's podcast, and it was good to hear from Andrew, which was our own One Nation Under Whiskey that we dropped, sharing the overlord perspective on the podcast. Thank you, John. Cheers. That's why we did it. Drifting into my question.
Here we are. Yep.
The listeners are whiskey geeks who love detail and the story behind the story. Mm-hmm. As we wait for the Worm Tub episode, your loyal listeners soak up all the minutiae, the insights, the subtle details which go into making a great whiskey or growing a distillery. We even are learning about grain, watering techniques and crop insurance. That entire paragraph makes me so damn happy. Like, I feel so spectacularly seen. That is, I'm taking a little swig of flame to celebrate.
Yeah, I'll do a little shadow.
Delightful. Thank you, John. That is really cool. Thank you. In a similar spirit, share a bit about the motivations for agreeing to be acquired. The struggles, the issues, the personal or corporate reasons that nudged SCN to look for a corporate partner. Maybe it was the struggles to secure new casks. SCN might have needed more capital to tie up into future stock. There may have been logistical hurdles which are not easy to solve until there was a marked increase in distribution. I suspect the small business owners in the audience can learn from how you made the decision to look for options. Every day can be the day when a fork in the road appears. And what do I always say when you approach a fork in the road, Joshua?
Take it.
Change is constant, and adjusting to change before it is forced is a skill. What business insights can J&J share with the audience? And then final, he's out of here on this. I am reminded of Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken, a poem about a fork in the road and the need to decide which way to go, knowing that the future is uncertain, yet you still need to make a decision. And that is signed Sloop John B.
My grandfather and me.
Did I get the song name right?
Yeah, Sloop John B.
Okay, because it's signed John Carey. John Corey.
John Carey.
Third one's a charm. So isn't that brilliant, right? So he's caught up on the back catalogue. He's following the story. He sees what we've done, what we're doing, what we're about. And now, and the part that really got me here was I suspect the small business owners in the audience can learn from how you made the decision to look for options. That's a grand takeaway for me. But Joshua, I will cede my time to you.
Yeah, was the decision to, it's interesting. It's so easy to say we have sold the company. But I don't think that that's an accurate response or an accurate statement. Like, yes, have we sold the company? Yeah, like, gun to your head, that's the statement. We have sold the company to Artisanal Spirits Company. There you go, right? There's no bones about it. But that's not how I think about it. I think about it as joining the Artisanal Spirits Company, joining that family. And, we, you and I, and then Jess starting in 2019, have spent 13 years building a brand fully on reputation. And we've brought this baby to bar mitzvah age. Mm-hmm. And could we have sold to anybody? Maybe. Like, could we
just say maybe? Yeah.
Could we have sold the company and just left? Yeah, but it kind of feels weird. Like, you don't just let your 13-year-old baby go and say, be on your way with you, Like for me, it was so important to not just sell, but to join a larger company that would allow us to do the things that we had not only been doing, but to do the things that we had wanted to do but haven't been able to do because it was a 2-man and then a 3-person operation. And, like, this is more matchmaking than it is selling a company. The fact that they wanted us.
Yeah.
They weren't investing in Single Cask Nation. They were investing in us to run Single Cask Nation. They were entrusting us to continue running Single Cask Nation in the manner that we had been. They were entrusting us to grow Single Cask Nation in the ways in which we wanted to. And so to have that ability to carry our dreams forward, to ensure that our kids don't just get out of middle school and can go to high school, but we can take them on to university, that's important to me. Like, we are still the parents of this, and I'm not ready to let my kid go. And there's still a lot of raising to do here. And for me, that was huge. Huge.
Yeah, I think personally speaking, we are both in the same boat with our literal kids, right? We're looking at universities and we're looking at high school and we're looking at a final transition from middle school to high school this summer, right? This company really is our baby.
It really is our baby.
Really is. And it's the youngest of, the 4 kids we share between us. It's the 5th and youngest, the one that gets away with so much more than its elder siblings. But I think to that point, and to John's part of the question here about small business owners, you and I started a whiskey company because we were passionate about whiskey and we were passionate about sharing whiskey.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of small business owners get into running a small business because they're passionate about the thing that they're trying to sell. You know, so many people are trying to say, how do I turn my hobby or my side gig or my passion project into a full-time job? But what that meant for us was we never entered with an exit strategy. And if we are talking to fellow small business owners, you know, why would you kick-start, I'm using that advisedly, a small business that you're passionate about and then think about how it all ends? You're so focused on getting it started and getting it built and getting it standing somewhat on its own 2 feet and not failing in the first 7 months, 18 months, 24 months, what have you. Yeah. So we never came in with an exit strategy. It was interesting reaching a point where we started to have those questions of, what does the next 5 years hold? What does the next 10 years hold? What's our role in this? And you and I've said this in the tasting that we did at Jack Rose that was so much fun, right? We were 36, 37 when we kicked this off, right?
Yep.
You've turned 50. Now I'm coming 50. Yeah. The headlights are bright in my eyes. What do you have? Like, that's what I'm chanting, right? 5 more years, right? 10 more years, 15, like... When you're 36, 37 starting a passion project, you're not thinking about the off-ramp. Yeah. When you're staring 50 square between the eyeballs, you start thinking, what's the future here? Yeah. And if we absolutely love this brand and we absolutely love the nation, it can't end with just us. No. Right? No. It has to be a larger team. When we brought Jess in to be a support, when we brought Elijah in to be a support, it was the beginning of, we can't do this alone, right? Yeah. Now we've got corporate support. That means Single Cask Nation can be something with the 3 J's, Jason, Joshua, and Jess. It can be something beyond the 3 J's. And if we love this 5th kid, then we owe it to that kid to be able to go forth into the world and represent themselves. Yeah. And that's not a thought we're having as small business people. That's global brand partner conversation.
And what this partnership does, joining their artisanal spirits company, is it gives us access to stock unlike we hadn't seen previously. It gives us control of our bottling because it's now all bottled in-house.
In-house. In-house makes me smile every time I say it or think it.
And that's not to say bad things about third-party bottling halls. They're great. They're fantastic. That's how we've lived.
They are fantastic.
But to have it in-house and ensuring that, we're able to hit the deadlines we need to hit without, making adjustments here and there, what a difference 2024 has been, where, the first 13 years of our business, we've had to always adjust based on what our bottling hall has been able to do for us. Now having our logistics in place from a bottling standpoint, we're able to plan out the entirety of 2024, knowing the capabilities of our own in-house bottling. And that just takes us to a whole new level, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. To the point that was being made in the news segment, right? Here's 3 casks coming in March. Here's 3 casks coming in April. Here's 3 casks coming in May, right? Getting that written down is unbelievable. And then the global markets, as we teased previously about the 6 releases that are going to come out to the next in the next round of global releases, second to none. So. Yeah, I love that question from John, and you and I could spend an episode answering that. We could bring Jess in and get her perspective on answering that. We could bring Steve Hawley in and get his perspective on answering that. Like, this is Which is almost to say we could have asked it in the mailbag episode, but I really wanted to sit with it because it's so good and dedicate its own space. So sincere thanks to John for that. If you're out there in listener land and you want to ask a question, or share a thought or whatever leads you to sending in a missive, you can contact us at info@singlecastnation.com. You can write into questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com. No E in whiskey. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to answer anything that's on your mind. One of the things, Joshua, as you're talking about, is getting into season 8 here. As we're finding new listeners along the way, don't be afraid to write in and ask a question that was covered in season 1 or season 2 or season 3. Or just my point being, if you think I'm a bit late to the game, I'm not sure I could ask that question now, please do, because you're not in that boat alone. There's plenty of other new listeners who would benefit from that as well. And one of the things about established listeners and those who caught up during hospitalization, like John, we're all in this together. And established listeners are more than happy to hear us perhaps give a different answer to the same question.
It's true.
Who knows what we'll answer in 2024? The industry changes. John says that in his email. Change is constant. Heraclitean concept. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
So
Hercules always said that. I agree. Yeah.
I always quote the movie version with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Do you know the cartoon version of Hercules? There was a cartoon, like a Disney cartoon, Hercules.
I was going to say, like Disney movie?
Yeah, it was like a Disney movie.
Yeah, I just thought you were kind of suggesting like a show, like an animated show.
It was like a Disney movie.
Yeah, the Disney movie.
I think it was Disney, but Delma used to always call it Hercules. I want to watch Hercules. Like, no, it's Hercules. Hercules.
Oh, you should have introduced her to Poirot.
Poirot? What's that?
Yeah, Agatha Christie's Poirot. His first name was Hercule. So anytime she asked for it, you should have put on a French detective with a little handlebar moustache.
Ah, yes.
See how she responds to that. How you like that, Delma?
How do you like that? How do you like them apples?
Yeah, how you like the French detective? Ha! Anyway, Joshua, you might be able to tell this, I've finished both Flame and Shadow.
I have not only finished both Flame and Shadow, I've poured more Flame. Yeah, listen, we talk about our own bottlings, and of course we want people to purchase our bottlings, but
yes, please.
Lost Lantern is worth your time, and I think
go buy Flame.
Yeah,
Christ, go buy Shadow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Gentle Giant.
Support independent bottlings and independent bottlers.
Absolutely.
That's what I say.
Gosh, Joshua, I've recharged my glass with Flame.
You know what? There you go. I'm gonna add a dash more, and let's get out of here on a toast, Jason. I'm gonna toast to our friends Nora and Adam, and to independent bottling, and to American single malt. Again, right? We'd been. I think our first Westland was bottled in 2014. Here we are, 2024, and now you've got Lost Lantern really putting a focus on it, and it's nice to have a partner, and I'm hoping more partners join in to help grow awareness about this category, because it's clear. It's excellent stuff. People give a shit about what they're making. They give a shit about what's being put in bottle. And it's nice that they're relying on independent bottlers like us and like Lost Lantern to help proselytize the category.
Well played.
Thank you. Triptych. And we will continue to do that. So,
and to all
a good night.
Who's sailing her?
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Happy New Year!
Hey.